The Source.
Ocala's information station, 1370 WOCA.
Ocala.
All right, 6 minutes after 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. I heard some talk the other day on other radio shows about global warming and kind of making fun of it because of the fact that it's really cold lately. And, it's kind of hard as lay people to really get a handle on that. And this isn't about global warming, but I've often said, when we've had these discussions with people who were adamant that they were right that there was global warming, adamant that they were right that there was not global warming, adamant that they were right or wrong about our contribution as human beings to the global warming. The one thing I've always said is, you know what? I don't know. I do a radio show, so I can't be the guy who actually tells anybody who's telling the truth and who's making a mistake. But I can tell you this, that when I go into the river and I see fewer fish there than used to be there, then maybe something's happening. And maybe some of the fertilizers we're using are leaching into the water and causing problems. And maybe the atmosphere around Los Angeles, when I fly into LA and I see this huge dome of darker air that looks like it's dirty air to the average eye, you say, well, maybe there is something we could do to clean up. And when you hear that coal is such a wonderful thing to be used to create energy, you say, yeah, it is. But then you find out that it has some leftovers, has ash, that does cause problems. We can't turn a blind eye just because you say it's wonderful, let's forget about the bad part. You got to look at the good and the bad and try to figure out a way to make things work so that we don't go crazy. I mean, you can overdo anything, and there's a lot of people on this planet, so it's easier now than ever. The more people we have, the more easy it is to go to overload. That's why watchdogs are so important. Our next guest might be considered a watchdog. Jared Saylor is on the phone. He's the campaign director at Earth Justice, the Environmental Protection Agency's finalization of the first ever coal ash regulations. Will go into effect by December 19th of this year, I believe, if I have my notes right, and I believe to affect coal ash waste ponds in 37 states. I will tell you, honestly, I'm not so sure what that means. So let's find out from Jared what it means and just say good morning first. Good morning, Jared. How you doing?
Good morning, Larry. Thanks. I'm doing great.
Where are you?
I'm in Washington, D.C. right now.
All right, so let's start with coal ash. Define it. I'm guessing it's just what's left over after coal is burned?
That's exactly right. When you could imagine, maybe not necessarily in Florida, but in other parts of the country, when you burn in your chimney and you've got leftover ash, this is essentially what's happening at coal-fired power plants, except the quantity and toxicity of that ash is so much greater. These coal-fired power plants are burning literally millions of tons of coal every year. Once that coal is burned, the resulting ash is often mixed with water or just simply trucked out of the power plant to a nearby pond or landfill where it's dumped. And it's been dumped for the last 50, 60, 70 years. And this pollution, this coal ash, ends up in our local water supplies. It ends up in our air, in the air that we breathe, and it's become a real problem. I mean, at over 200 sites around the country, coal ash has contaminated a nearby waterway. And just recently, a little over 2 weeks ago, 82,000 tons of coal ash spilled out of a coal ash pond in North Carolina into the Dan River, which is a drinking water source for cities in North Carolina. So it's a serious problem that just frankly hasn't been addressed since, forever. And our litigation and our efforts is going to lead to the first ever federal regulations for coal ash disposal.
And did I have my date right? Is it December of this year?
That's correct, December 19th.
That's the deadline?
That's
okay. So let's see, I want to ask you a few things, first of all. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but can you address our local circumstance? I know that the nuclear power plant in Crystal River announced that they were no longer going to be a nuclear power plant, but that they will continue to be a coal burning plant, which they've been for a long time. Robin's husband worked there, right? Is that what they're doing?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
That's what they're doing. They're having the coal burners.
Okay. Well, your microphone's not working too well. Something happened to it. Okay. I don't know if you could hear her, Jared, but Robin's husband, Tap that microphone. Make sure something's not working on that mic.
Okay.
But Robin's husband used to work over there, so we kind of have a little inside scoop. Not that we claim to know anything about it, but do you know, is the coal plant in our own backyard creating some of these ponds of ash?
Well, if they're burning coal, they almost certainly are creating some kind of ash.
Makes sense.
The question then becomes, how are they disposing it? Right now, without any federal regulations, it really is relying on state regulations to dispose of this stuff. The problem is, as you can imagine, with coal ash in 37 different states, you've got 37 different ways to manage it. And no state is really doing the kind of protections that the local nearby communities deserve. I can tell you in Florida is the 7th largest coal ash generator in the country. It's generating over 6 million tons of this stuff every year. And this is ash that's filled with things like mercury and lead and arsenic dumped into nearby ponds. I mean, our household garbage is better regulated than this toxic waste.
So okay, help me out here. If I were to be doing an interview back in the when was maybe the 80s, when James Taylor was embarking on the singer James Taylor was embarking on these anti-nuclear power plant and telling us how scary those were going to be. Is that actually preferable now by today's observations?
I think that's a really good question. You've got certainly a set of problems that are associated with nuclear power, where you're not necessarily generating climate change pollutants. You're not generating this kind of coal ash that I'm here talking about. You are generating nuclear waste, and we know that no one wants nuclear waste in their backyards. It's a pretty extremely toxic and dangerous material.
Right.
I think really that it isn't a matter of one or the other. It's a matter of really utilizing all available energy sources and moving us towards clean and renewable energy. Now, I don't think anyone, whether you consider yourself an environmentalist or not, I don't think anyone would agree that shutting off coal tomorrow is going to be the solution to our problem. That's going to create a whole other set of problems. But I do think that, in planning ahead and looking at a 20, 30, or 50-year timeline, it is time for us to start thinking about other ways to produce our energy. Solar and wind are absolutely a lot more productive than they were 20, 30, even 10 years ago. And I think moving our economy, moving our nation towards those kinds of energy sources is really going to position us to be stronger.
Yeah, and I love the message, but the reality is the catalyst that always gets everything moving is money. When somebody says, "Oh, I can make money with this," I mean, that's why we have coal. That's why we have oil. It wasn't because they wanted us to have power. They wanted to have money. And so if we could maybe use that simple economics rule and apply it to wind or to solar, I don't know, am I on the right track here? I'm okay with people making money off of solar if it's going to clean up the air.
I absolutely agree with you, and I think that the absolute motivator is the bottom line. And there are companies, there are industries that are actually really doing well by producing solar panels for rooftops, by producing wind turbines that can be positioned offshore, onshore. And you look at economies like, say, for instance, in West Virginia. I've done a lot of work with organizations in West Virginia who are dealing with coal mining and coal waste. And those communities are just so burdened by being so dependent on this dirty fossil fuel. And I think that what we can offer, what our nation needs to move towards, is removing that burden and replacing it with an opportunity.
Every state has a uniqueness about them, and we feel that our state is unique in that it has a lot of natural springs here. They're beautiful for swimming and taking your families to. The bottling companies come down here, and then they keep extracting the water from that to make money, and that thereby causes the fish to leave, and it causes the water to become dirty and murky. Is that kind of an operation like a threat in conjunction with the coal ash because it does seep into the ground?
That's absolutely right, Robin. I think that Florida, I've had the fortune to spend some time down there, and Earth Justice is very proud. We have an office based in Tallahassee, and we do a lot of water and air quality work in the state of Florida. One thing that I've learned in talking to Floridians, water is key. Water is key to to the state, to the ability for the state to succeed, to be a great tourist destination. And this coal ash material, 6.1 million tons of it, it's polluting that clean water that Florida relies so heavily upon. There's certainly an issue of climate change related to coal burning. I think what we really focus on in terms of the coal ash is its impact on clean water and its impact on clean air. I don't think that regardless of whether someone wants to debate the impacts of climate change, I think it's hard to debate the need to have clean water and clean air. And really cleaning up this coal ash waste is going to be a big step to protecting our water quality, making sure we have clean water, making sure we have air that's breathable, and really promoting a clean economy for Florida.
Let me read the first paragraph of the news release, and then I have a question. The news release, which was issued on the 12th of this month, says the Environmental Protection Agency will finalize the first ever federal regulations for the disposal of coal ash by December 19th, 2014, according to a settlement in a lawsuit brought by environmental and public health groups and a Native American tribe. The settlement does not dictate the content of the final regulation, but it confirms that the agency will finalize a rule by a certain date after years of delay. So I guess I'm questioning the date, the December 19th date. What happens on that date, and do we need to do anything as far as citizens writing our elected officials?
So on that date, the EPA will finally finalize the first ever coal ash regulations. And I'm going to take a step back for a second just to give you some context. Back in 2008, there was a massive coal ash spill in Tennessee. This happened a few days before Christmas, December 2008. It was the largest coal ash spill in our nation's history, and actually one of the largest environmental disasters that we've ever had. Shortly after that, as the Obama administration took office, the EPA promised to finalize the first ever federal regulations for coal ash disposal. Up until really today, even, there's never been any federal protections for coal ash disposal. And like I said earlier, at 37 states, with enough coal ash generated every year to run from the North Pole to the South Pole, run from train cars and running from the North Pole to the South Pole, this is a lot of waste that is just totally unregulated. So when the EPA proposed their rule in May of 2010, they solicited public comments. They received over 500,000 comments from people saying, clean up this waste, regulate this material. Even the industries were able to comment, the power industries, the coal industries. And after that, EPA really just kind of sat on its hands. It hadn't taken the initiative to actually finalize the rule. One of the great things about our environmental laws, the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, the Resource Conservation Recovery Act, which is what coal ash is regulated, is a provision that allows citizens, just like you and me, to go to court to enforce these rules. The Congress, when they passed these rules back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, really knew that the agencies, the federal agencies, weren't going to have the resources, and so they put in these provisions to allow citizens to go to court and sue the government, and that's what we did. Earth Justice did that on behalf of 10 other organizations and one Native American tribe, and the judge agreed with us and said that EPA not finalizing this rule was in violation of the federal law. And so what was established is this December 19th deadline. The EPA has proposed different options for regulating this rule. So what this doesn't do is determine exactly what EPA will, how it will regulate coal ash. What it does do is set a deadline for EPA to finalize the first ever regulation.
A lot of the government officials now, at least in our area, are holding town hall meetings for the people to come and voice their opinions and concerns. Is this something that the elected official will address, or because of politics, will they skirt the issue?
Well, I think this is an important point, and Larry, I apologize for not answering. You had asked this as well. What needs to happen? EPA is under this court-ordered deadline. I live and work in Washington. I kind of breathe politics more than the average person, frankly, more than my good health would want me to. But there's always politics at play in these kinds of things. And I think if senators and congressmen know that this is an issue important to the people that they represent, they will pay attention. I know it's hard nowadays. Folks are certainly correct in having very little hope with this Congress. It's been a really, really difficult Congress, and I think that there's the partisanship that's happening here in D.C. is really unprecedented. However, one of the greatest things of our country is our ability to participate in democracy, in our right to contact those that we elected and tell them why we think this particular issue is important. The Congress has tried to legislate against EPA regulating this. They've tried in the past. They've been unsuccessful so far. But this is really an effort that if EPA is not allowed to regulate coal ash, we're only going to see more of the problems that we've seen in the past 15 years. This problem hasn't gotten better; it's only gotten worse. But having a federal regulation in place is really going to help communities that live near these facilities. We've got, Earth Justice has a website dedicated to our coal ash work, earthjustice.org/coal ash, and we actually have a opportunity for folks to write their senators, to write their Congress people, and tell them that they want regulations for coal ash, that they want clean air, they want clean water, and coal ash needs to be federally regulated.
So what do we want those regulations to say?
I think what we want them to say, and once you start looking at the problems of coal ash, it seems kind of obvious. You've got this material that's being stored into a pond or a landfill. There's no monitoring. There's no water quality monitoring of nearby streams or underground drinking water aquifers. They literally are dumping this into a big pit. So one thing that could make a huge difference is to line that pit. Some of these coal ash ponds are 30, 40, 50 years old. They weren't professionally engineered. And if you can imagine, millions of gallons of waste, of thick, sort of muddy material put into a hole, that hole is that pit is going to be pretty unsteady.
Now it almost sounds like some of the problems we have with the nuclear waste. I mean, you have the nuclear waste, and then what do you do with it? It piles up, and it's never good. Is that the same thing with coal ash? It could sit there in a lined pond. I mean, if you did put a liner in the pond, for example, put the coal ash in the pond with the liner. Okay, now it's not leaching into the soil, but it's still there, and it's and it's always going to get bigger.
That's right. And one thing that is really important about all this, I haven't mentioned this yet. When you set federal regulations for disposing of a waste like coal ash, what you're actually doing is encouraging more recycling of this material. The EPA just came out about 2 weeks ago. They just came out with a report where they really, the EPA had promoted the recycling of coal ash into things like wallboard, bricks, cement, and it really does make a difference to regulate it. For instance, if you can imagine, if you own a power plant and you have one option to take this coal ash, dump it into a pond, monitor it, line the pond, follow all these federal regulations, or you have another option to sell this coal ash to a recycler who's going to turn it into bricks for buildings or who's going to turn it into cement for sidewalks. Well, I think as we talked about earlier, your incentive is to boost your bottom line. You want to recycle that material. You don't want to just throw it in the pond. But as it is right now, without that incentive, it's just easier for them to throw it into the pond. There isn't that incentive to
okay, so a question I have is: are there any coal power plants that are actually doing that?
There are quite a few, as a matter of fact. And during the rulemaking, the public comment period back in 2010, a lot of agencies, a lot of companies commented on the fact that they are recycling it. As a matter of fact, one of the other defendants, the other plaintiffs in the litigation that we sued upon, we didn't represent them, but it was an organization that wanted to get a final deadline because they are coal ash recyclers. They want to have certainty so they can then promote their work.
So the problem is solved. I mean, you can actually use this stuff for something.
It's going to make a huge difference. And like I said, it's just the incentive to then recycle it. As it currently stands, it's easier for coal companies, for coal-fired power plants to dump it.
Well, now even is understandable by me. And that's saying something. If I understand it, well, it makes sense to me. I mean, if you can use it for something, I mean, and you're sitting on a park bench and it said this is made from disposed milk bottles or something like that, right?
Exactly.
Is there a map of the location of these ponds? Because it seems like this would get in the way of the people that are fracking and that also want to run that pipeline, and that might open up a new can of worms.
That's true. We do have a map on our website at earthjustice.org/coal ash. There are about, I think, around 1,200 coal ash sites across the country. 200 of these sites have already contaminated nearby waters, and this is only what we know. One of the other things that, Larry, you had asked earlier, one of the other things that's going to come from this regulation is that there will be more information, more data, that once these regulations are in place, the coal-fired power plants will have to tell us about what is in these ponds, where they're located, the size, the depth, the quantity, all those kinds of things. And frankly, in October I went to Tennessee and toured that facility that had that massive spill in 2008, and I was shocked to see that literally just maybe a quarter of a mile away were homes. When that spill happened, there were 24 homes that were just completely destroyed. I talked to a guy who had riverfront property, and he can't sell his property now because it's been contaminated by this coal ash. So this is really, it's not something that is sort of happening outside of where people live or, in the middle of nowhere. It's quite the opposite. There are a lot of facilities that are located right next to communities.
Jared, I thank you for coming on, and I will go to the phone. I know somebody's been waiting patiently. I apologize for making the caller wait so long, but I wanted to say something. If I was going to write to my elected official, this is what I would say. I would say, A, this is dirtying up the atmosphere. We need to do something about it. B, if you can mandate that people buy health insurance, you can mandate that coal plants recycle the coal ash. It sounds like that's the answer to the problem. And C, do not make this one of those bills that's got lots of other bills attached to it.
Yeah.
Make this one of those things that is simple, okay? Don't make it all so complicated. I'm sick and tired of these bills having other things attached to it, and that's why they get turned down.
That's right.
All right, let me go to the phone. Good morning. Thank you for being patient. You're on the air.
Good morning. It's Sonny calling in. You did touch on some of it, but I work for utilities in New York with Con Ed, but they had there's numerous coal-fired generating stations in New York City itself, and as I recollect, we had yards where we had to store the ash, and it used to be trucked away. Don't ask me where, I don't know, but when they had a big program to lengthen the runways at Kennedy and also at LaGuardia, all of a sudden that ash was recycled into the cement that was used to lengthen these runways, and it was proven to be make the cement stronger, etc. Another product that can be made from the coal ash is something like along the lines of ceramic tiles, besides regular building blocks. There's one block that we used to see all the time was what they called cinder block. But way I understand a lot of this that's in Washington is basically the attitude that we hear is they just want to stop coal mining, shut the coal mines down, shut everything down. And that's not going to work either.
Yeah.
I mean, people flip a switch on the wall, they want to see a light come on or
That's right.
something.
Yeah, and I think Jared covered that. Yeah. All right. Yeah. No, you make it go. Wow, that was pretty cool about the runaway at JFK.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for that. Well, there's an example. Obviously, somebody was doing this before, and I think that's the solution. This is like a no-brainer for me. All right. Well, we have to make our legislators. Sometimes we pay more attention than they do, I think.
That's exactly right. And Larry, I think your 3-point letter is spot on. And I think that's exactly what needs to be said to our elected officials, that this is a material that's polluting our waters and our air. There's a simple solution. that actually is going to benefit not only us as a society, but it's going to benefit industry, and it's going to create more jobs, and it's going to create less pollution. I mean, it just seems so simple.
It sure does. It sure does. And if they can mandate that we buy insurance, they can mandate that coal companies use this in the way that JFK had its runways strengthened. Jared, thank you for what you're doing and for being so skilled at being able to articulate it so that in 25 minutes we grasped it, which I think is pretty talented. I mean, you take it for granted you've got that ability. So the website is earthjustice.org, right?
That's correct. earthjustice.org/coal ash, but you can get there straight from earthjustice.org.
Okay, excellent. Jared Saylor, it's an honor to be able to say you were on our show. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you very much, Larry. Thank you too, Robin.
Thank you so much, sir. It has been an honor and a privilege.
All right, we'll take a break. We'll be right back.
Hey, Liz.
Yes, George.
Your cousin Myrtle wants to watch TV.
So?
She wants to watch TV in our living room.
So?
Well, she needs a chair.